The role of first language in the development of interlanguage phonology, syntax, and morphology. Interlanguage resembles the speaker's native language in the early stages of SLA. This occurs because certain language rules transfer from the native language into English. This occurs in three major areas of language: phonology, the function, behavior, and organization of the sounds of English as a language; syntax, rules of sentence structure; morphology, the study of forms and formations of words, including inflections and formations of words such as contractions, roots, prefixes, and suffixes; unpreparedness; and compound words, backpack. Gradually, ELLs learn English-specific rules and stop using the ones transferred from native language. Phonology. To give you an idea of how language transfer occurs in phonology, consider the typical pronunciation of the English words have, dog, absolutely, headphones. English speakers and German speakers: have, half; dog, dock; absolutely, absolutely; headphones, headphones. A phonological rule a German speaker has in his or her repertoire is voiced consonant devoicing, a process where a sound that is pronounced using the vocal cords like d or v is turned into a sound that does not require vocal cords to pronounce, like t or f, which occurs in two places: where a word ends in a voiced consonant, the v becoming an f in the word have, and g becoming k in the word dog. When a voiced consonant is followed by a voiceless consonant, b becoming a voiceless p because it is followed by a voiceless s, and d becoming a t because it is followed by a voiceless f. Not only do language learners have to learn not to devoice consonants, but they also have to acquire many new sounds that are present in English but are absent in their first language. Perhaps the most difficult process of acquiring English, especially for older children and adults, is learning to pronounce consonants and vowels in English that bear no resemblance to the consonants and vowels found in first language. Before ELLs have learned to produce English-specific sounds, they will substitute them for sounds that bear the closest resemblance from their first language. For example, when a native speaker of English is learning Spanish, he or she will find it difficult to pronounce the rolling R. As a result, he or she will substitute it for the English R sound until the Spanish equivalent is learned. A native of Russian will find it difficult to pronounce the TH sound in the word there, the, and will substitute it for a Z, zer. First language, second language example why the transfer happens. English to Spanish: perro, perro. English does not have a rolling R sound, and English speaker would substitute it for the English R sound. Russian to English: over there. Russian does not have a TH sound, and speakers of Russian often replace it with a Z sound. Generally, there are two types of sounds: those that are common to all languages and are easy to learn, and those that are language-specific and difficult to learn. The rolling R and the TH and there are sounds specific to Spanish and English. On the other hand, sounds like d, t, b, p are common to a number of languages around the world and easy to learn for most people. Usually, ELLs learn English-specific sounds first because they stand out the most. Later, they adjust their pronunciation of the more common sounds. The process of acquiring native-like pronunciation can take up to 15 years to achieve. Sometimes non-native-like pronunciation becomes fossilized, which gives an impression that ELLs, especially adults, could never speak like native English speakers. However, fossilization in all domains of language can be overcome. Language learners simply need to recognize that they're making a mistake. Once they recognize this mistake, they can work to fix it. As the ELLs get older, they will require more assistance in recognizing their errors, although comparing first and second language helps with this recognition. Then, over a period of time, depending on age, they will have to exert a lot of cognitive effort to fix their pronunciation errors, or syntactical or morphological errors if there are any. After months of practice, ELLs will have successfully automatized the new correct language rule.
This recording, Russia 9, is copyright the International Dialects of English Archive. Comma Gets a Cure is copyright Douglas N. Honoraff, Jill McCullough, and Barbara Somerville.
I was born in 1977 in St. Petersburg, Russia. Lived here all my life. Never traveled abroad. I'm a translator. I work with my partner, my wife. She's American. She teaches comparative literature, and she acts as my dialogue coach, so to speak. I began to study English at the age of 4. There were English language courses here in St. Petersburg for children, for small children. And my first teacher, her English skills were adequate. Like most Russians, she spoke with a thick accent. Her grammar was what we call Russian English, which is pretty much characteristic of people from that era. She was an older person, and I don't think she had ever traveled abroad. In high school, my English was pretty strong already for the educational program. I am obsessed with correct pronunciation, or rather, speaking English without an accent, without a foreign accent. Okay, and now I'm going to say a few words in Russian. Я очень рад, что существует ваш веб-сайт. Я его очень люблю. Очень часто к нему обращаюсь. Очень хорошая библиотека сэмплов, которые помогают мне в изучении английского, которые я буду рекомендовать людям, которые хотят заниматься английским. Очень бы хотелось, чтобы фонетические транскрипции появились на как можно большее количество файлов. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Another feature of morphology, of phonology, that might be difficult for ELLs to learn is how English words are divided into syllables and which syllable in a word is stressed. In early stages of SLA, ELLs will transfer first language syllabification rules. For example, Arabic has a rule that does not allow blends in the onset of a word. Therefore, native speakers of Arabic will break apart blends that stand in the onset of a word until they learn that the rule does not apply in English. English target non-native speaker. Plant English target pilant non-native speaker. English target translate non-native speaker translate. English target Fred non-native speaker Fired. Both Arabic and Russian have a rule by which the second to last syllable is always stressed, compared to English, where it is the first or last, depending on the part of speech. English target astonish, non-native speaker astonish. English target maintain, non-native speaker maintain. English target cabinet, non-native speaker cabinet. Syntax. Not only do ELLs have to learn English-specific phonology, but also English-specific rules by which sentences are created. Language transfer occurs at the syntax level for ELLs as well. For example, Spanish speakers will apply the null subject rule in English, a rule that allows the speaker to omit the subject of a sentence. Habla español. He speaks Spanish. Or él habla español. He speaks Spanish. While it is grammatically correct to omit he from the sentence in Spanish, the null subject rule does not hold up in English, and therefore speak Spanish is an incomplete sentence. The strict word order of English might pose a problem for many ELLs, whose first language has a flexible word order. For example, in Spanish, word order can be both VSO, verb, subject, object, and SVO, subject, verb, object, while English only allows the word order to be SVO. As a result, Spanish speakers might produce sentences that look like the following. Juan llegó, John arrived. Llegó Juan, arrived John. Sentence number 2 is correct in English, while incorrect in English while acceptable in Spanish. Over time, Spanish speakers learned that the verb cannot come before the subject in English. In later modules, you will learn about strategies to help second language learners acquire proper English grammar or syntax. Morphology. Learning the types of words that exist and how they are created in English is a process that occurs in predictable stages. ELLs develop English morphology in the same way native English speakers do. Please refer to their chart in Module 2, right below this text. However, as you can see, the order in which ELLs acquire English morphology is a little different. It is also important to remember that young children ages 1 to 5 will acquire English morphology in the same way as native speakers do. In fact, children that have learned English before the age of 5 are said to be native speakers of English, or bilinguals if they retained their ethnic language. For older learners, the order of this development scheme might vary. For example, because Russian lacks definite articles and indefinite articles, a native speaker of Russian, ages 6 and up, might take longer to develop his/her understanding of English definite and indefinite articles than listed on the table above. Therefore, when examining interlanguage of English learners, it is important to consider the features of first language. This requires some research on your part. Here are some resources for Spanish grammar, vocabulary, verbs, and pronunciation you can use. Keep in mind that in order to teach Spanish speakers, you do not have to be proficient in Spanish, although it helps greatly, but you must be familiar with major grammatical features of Spanish or other pertinent languages and be able to compare them with grammatical features of English. Here are some other interesting resources for other languages you might encounter. Look at the list below the following paragraph. The amount of information these resources provide can seem overwhelming, but it is possible to narrow down the list using this method. When working with an ELL, identify what feature the student has a problem with. After you have identified the feature, research whether the student's first language has a similar feature using the resources provided. Read about the feature and figure out how it translates into English, and then draw the connection for the student. When you are explicitly teaching language features to students, you are providing them with direct evidence. If the feature you're teaching your students is missing from their first language, they have to learn a completely new language concept and apply it. If there is a feature that is missing in English but is present in their native language, then the learner does not have to learn anything new and instead has to simply learn not to use the feature. This is much easier than having to learn a brand new language concept.